Your data is like gold to hackers, and they'll sell it to the highest bidder. Are you protected? McAfee helps shield you, blocking suspicious texts, malicious emails, and fraudulent websites. McAfee Secure VPN lets you browse safely, and its AI-powered text scam detector spots threats instantly. You'll also get up to $2 million of award-winning antivirus and identity theft protection, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Dave, I know you've been traveling. Tell me a little bit about why.
Well, I wanted to see what Democrats were building in opposition as they were wringing their hands about the party's inability to slow Trump down legislatively.
Dave Weigel writes about politics over at Semafor. And I called him up because I'd noticed he was on the road. Last week, he was traveling with former vice presidential candidate Tim Walz. Then he popped up at rallies being held by Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. All these electeds, they were trying to figure out where to go from here.
And they didn't have conclusions necessarily. They named a few policies, which we can get into, but they did not have a rally that said, here is the plan to reverse all of our losses. It was very embryonic, very experimental.
They're doing jazz, is what you're telling me.
Sure, because they're doing their Dizzy Gillespie at Montreux moment in the Resistance.
The thing is, just because what Dave saw seemed experimental does not mean it was small.
In the hundreds of rallies that I have done, we have never, ever had a rally as large as this.
The images out of Bernie Sanders' rally with AOC in Colorado, they were the ones that really made me stop and think. Tens of thousands of people standing shoulder to shoulder.
We will not allow America to become an oligarchy. This nation was built by working people. And we're not going to let a handful of billionaires run the government.
Dave says the turnout, it even surprised Senator Sanders himself.
We're backstage and I have a little time with him. And Sanders says to me, isn't this amazing? I'm not going to do a Sanders impression as much as I want to. Isn't this amazing? I'm not running for anything. Alexandria is not running for anything. The point he was making was that half of the people that showed up for these rallies were not on the campaign's list. They were not expecting to build this quickly, and they were not making huge asks to people. The only ask at these rallies was Ocasio-Cortez saying, everybody take a minute, a little bit like church, introduce yourself to your neighbor.
This organizing 101. Dave says it made some sense because this crowd didn't have protester energy. But there they were, rallying anyway.
And it was, I think, just a coherence of all of these very frustrated Democrats and progressives and liberals and independents saying they feel lost and they want somebody to tell them what's going on. So what is this?
Yeah, do you think Bernie or AOC could answer the question, what is this, if you ask them?
Yes, they think what we need is a mass movement big enough to take away what these oligarchs have been building for themselves. And that means raising their taxes. That means paying for more healthcare benefits.
Sounds like he's kind of trying to radicalize some normies.
A little bit of that.
Today on the show, what the resistance to Donald Trump is shaping up to look like on the ground. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Shopping at Saks is a great way to discover the best new styles and elevate your everyday look, especially when you're short on time. The great thing about Saks.com is that it is always open 24 hours a day, which means you can browse from the comfort of your own home. Saks makes it really easy to find your favorite brands, and they offer amazing style inspiration. I'm not exaggerating when I say my jaw dropped at the shearling leather biker jacket I found, and that's not even mentioning the Alice and Olivia sequined mini dress I had my eye on. Whether you're refreshing your entire wardrobe or shopping for a vacation, Saks makes it fun and easy. So if you're looking for a fun, effortless shopping experience and you want to elevate your personal style, head on over to Saks. That's Saks.com for everyday inspiration. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations. The events you went to over the last week, they're examples of the kinds of events that are being held by Democrats and Democrat-aligned people all over the country. Like, I've seen these empty chair town halls that are being held in places like Wisconsin and I think Arizona. You have the DCCC. They're about to have what they call these people's town halls all over the country. And then we have like Tim Walz and Bernie and AOC kind of just barnstorming, freelancing, really, across the country. Because as you said, they're not running for anything. Tell me a little bit about the people who are showing up at these events. Because you've already alluded to the fact that, like at the Bernie and AOC events in Colorado, these weren't people on Bernie's lists. These were kind of normie Democrats looking to touch grass and see other people. Who were they and what were they saying they wanted out of the Democrats right now?
That's right. The people showing up to these rallies, they included some people who were recognizably left wing. I was walking to the Denver event, especially, and saw a guy with a Free Luigi sign. There were tables for the Party of Socialism Liberation. So there was left wing campaigning, electoral campaigning happening around the event. But yeah, half the people there were not Bernie people. And at the Walz event, they voted for Harris and Walz, but they were generally liberals who were mostly white, and these I was in Wisconsin, Colorado, so these were mostly white places, but mostly white liberals who felt that the sensible idea of government they believed in was being ripped apart. And the stories they would tell me when I'd ask people what was happening that was particularly concerning to them, it really ran the gamut. And the overall worry they had is that they were living in a pluralistic, not liberal country, but a country where that made a bunch of locked in gains from the civil rights movement and the New Deal and Great Society, and it was all going to be lost because of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. That everything they believed in was under attack, and they felt a little bit that way 8 years ago with Trump, but this is more intense.
What you're describing is kind of unfocused bad vibes from people, which I hear. And it's interesting because I've heard some folks compare this moment to the Tea Party moment, right? Where after Obama was elected, all of a sudden Republicans start showing up and hearing people at their town halls who are really angry at them. And it's interesting because I see some real differences here. First of all, it seems like the crowds are larger. They also seem more normie to me. They're not in like tri-corner hats and talking about some kind of ideological change they want. They're like moms and showing up because of a vague anxiety and looking for a little more direction. Is that fair? Am I reading this right?
I think that's fair, and I actually think the optics are important, more important than a lot of people on the left appreciate. The Bernie AOC tour, every state they went to, they were speaking behind a lectern framed by the flag of the state they were in and the American flag. And there was an effort to make this look like a very American, patriotic, in the interest of patriotism, because we love our country, we love our states, and because we love the people doing the right thing in these states. We are trying to take this back from Trump and Elon. I thought that was very intentional in the way these were put together. That we are not saying America is broken and screwed up, and that was very Tea Party-esque, because the Tea Party that I was covering in 2009 and 10 was very intent on linking it to American revolutionary thinking. But who is being not sidelined, but not put in front of that. The sort of left-wing politicking that thinks America is a fascist settler colonial state, that it has never been truly great, that it's built on stolen land, and those kind of politics were not part of these events. It was, when you say normie, that's how I interpret it. It is, we need a progressive politics that can win, and the progressive politics that wins looks more like FDR than it does a encampment at Columbia.
You know, part of the way that I see the fact that what's happening now on the ground is pretty different from what happened with the Tea Party is that the fact that the people in the crowd are less radical has real consequences downstream, right? If you are a normie who just feels like vaguely threatened by what's happening in Washington, it may make you less willing to take risky action of one kind or another. And that was kind of the secret sauce of the Tea Party to me, which is that they were totally willing to be weird and strange and extreme and norm busting.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, it made them obstructionist at first and then kind of successful. And so it's like not being like the Tea Party right now is both an advantage and that it's an open door to more people, but also a disadvantage in terms of what actions you're willing to take.
Oh, no, and that's very important because what the Tea Party did that was fairly new for a lot of conservatives, and conservatives had protested before, but showing up en masse, listening to rally speakers, having marches, they hadn't used the strategies of the left in that sort of direct politics before, and then they were. Progressives and Democrats have a few more disagreements because Democrats are an electoral party. It is about what is the action you can take that makes sure that you are in power next time. What Sanders is doing is honestly channeling some of that protest energy from let's stand outside and wave signs to convince your friend to run for office, and the system will not be ready for you. I think that made sense when he was talking about it, but it's reflecting this reality where the tactics that people thought that could use to slow down Trump or stop Trump last time, the tactics that they thought would bring progressive change, they tried them and they got some of what they wanted. I mean, the Green New Deal programs that passed in the IRA, they passed, but they didn't stop authoritarianism in the form of Trump as Bernie sees it. So they need something else to do, some other experiment.
Are the Tim Walzes of the world and the Bernie Sanders of the world singing from the same playbook here of what they want? Are they all talking about like we need to reorient around the oligarchy?
Yes, they were really harmonious, and Walz and Sanders have gotten on well. Walz and AOC have gotten on well. Walz's theory of politics is a lot like Sanders, but he's been a governor, which is you get elected, you do risky things to help people. And where did he get bit as governor? The backlash in the campaign to him, I shouldn't say backlash, but the Republican message about the campaign, it was either personal or it was about his approach to social issues and gender and things like that. They did not attack him on expanding school lunch, making it universal in schools. They did not even attack him on Minnesota's tax policy, which is you pay higher taxes in Minnesota than you do in some states, you get better benefits. And that really has given confidence, maybe is not the word for liberals right now, but that has told them, okay, what is it that we can run on that's popular?
Yeah. One of the most interesting moments in your sort of week-long tour to me was when you spoke to Tim Walz about the future and what he sees in the years post-Trump if Democrats come into power. Because what he talked about was, for instance, he wasn't defending what was being broken so much. He was saying, well, the Department of Ed may be broken up because we're not going to be able to stop Trump from doing that, but it gives us a chance to rebuild. You're talking about Democrats learning about messaging. What do you think Tim Walz was telling you with that answer about what he's learning?
You're right. The Walz answer was Trump has almost given us an opportunity where we can run on these big institutions and making them work better for people. And he compared that to what he'd done in Minnesota. And that would be not new for progressives, but new recently because they're operating in this electorate that does not trust government. And there's all kinds of reasons that they know they can't change. The reasons why people They don't think the government's very efficient. Democrats like to say, you think Social Security is efficient and the Postal Service is efficient. Don't let them break that down and make it worse.
Yeah, it's forced Democrats into a defensive posture where they're constantly defending something that people are constantly telling them doesn't work.
Exactly. And they have not had a fight in a while in a general election where they say, trust us, we're going to create a new big federal program and it's going to fix problems. And so I am wondering, okay, if the social contract in the government that we are used to can be blown up this quickly, what do we do? What do we run on? And how do we run on it in a way that we win elections?
We'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Shopping at Saks is a great way to discover the best new styles and elevate your everyday look, especially when you're short on time. The great thing about Saks.com is that it is always open 24 hours a day, which means you can browse from the comfort of your own home. Saks makes it really easy to find your favorite brands, and they offer amazing style inspiration. I'm not exaggerating when I say my jaw dropped at the shearling leather biker jacket I found. And that's not even mentioning the Alice and Olivia sequined mini dress I had my eye on. Whether you're refreshing your entire wardrobe or shopping for a vacation, Saks makes it fun and easy. So if you're looking for a fun, effortless shopping experience and you want to elevate your personal style, head on over to Saks. That's Saks.com for everyday inspiration.
When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the U.S. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP works wonders.
This episode is brought to you by Enterprise Mobility. From fleet management to flexible truck rentals to technology solutions, Enterprise Mobility helps businesses find the right mobility solutions so they can find new opportunities. Because if your business is on the road, they want to make sure it's on the road to success. Enterprise Mobility, moving you moves the world. Find your road at enterprisemobility.com.
Is it worth comparing the last week for people like Tim Walz and Bernie Sanders and AOC to Chuck Schumer? He had a very different week. He was supposed to be out there shilling for his new book, and I feel like he just kept showing up to kind of be beaten about the head by journalists, essentially.
It really was a choice for him to not do the public events where he was going to face public protests, but do the media events where he was just getting hard questions and saying the same answers. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was interesting to me because Chuck Schumer, leader of the Democrats in the Senate, he would kind of get to this place where he'd say, well, if Trump, violates what the Supreme Court tells him to do, then we'll be in a real pickle and we're going to need people to rise up. And it was an interesting split screen to me for him to be saying that and then to actually see 30,000 people show up for Bernie and AOC now in Denver. You know what I mean? Where it was sort of, he was like talking about some projected future when clearly there's this energy there now.
Yes, and where do their interests divide? It is that Sanders wants there to be a gigantic progressive political movement that overwhelms the system, and it could be independents and Democrats, probably will include a lot of independents. And the Schumer goal is taking back the Senate in 2027 for Democrats, 2026, having a Senate majority in 2027. How do you get there? What choices do you make that get you there? How do you get people excited to go volunteer for the candidates and donate to the candidates? That is a division. One of them is, how do we put our party back in a position to win again? And Schumer's answers have been very focused on making Trump less popular, which works sometimes, but it didn't work in 2022 for Republicans. Republicans operate in an environment where Joe Biden was very unpopular and underperformed in key races. They won the House narrowly. They didn't win the Senate. They didn't win any of the governor races they thought they would. I guess they held their own. And that memory, I think, sits more powerfully with Sanders and with AOC, because AOC also, she got into politics in 2018. She worked for Sanders 16 a little bit. But this idea of defending the Democratic Party and making sure it can come back, it's what's it ever done for her? She doesn't see that in Chuck Schumer or the leadership that's very worried about saying the right thing and not offending a donor.
No, the leadership seems to have been pretty committed with shutting her personally out, even if some of her ideas did make it into what the party was doing.
Yeah, and that's a little complicated because some of the fear about Ocasio-Cortez is just like with Kamala Harris, based on things she said years ago, not what she's doing now. Ocasio-Cortez right now is she has helped write messaging for the party, and that they'll agree with her on. But I found this talking to voters too. I would ask people if they thought they could vote for her for president, and they already were worried that she was unelectable. I mean, there is this complete collapse of confidence among Democrats that the things they want, the beliefs they have, could win a national election, even though they won one pretty recently.
It's so funny to me because I'm like, you know who looks pretty unelectable on paper? Donald Trump. It looks very unelectable.
That too, that screwed up their thinking of what could actually happen.
Dave says the big thing he saw when he went to these rallies last week was a recommitment to the electoral process. A lot of people were losing faith in a giant march saving them from anything.
I'd say that's the one real advancement from maybe 10 years ago. If you're watching these protests, there was an idea, an accelerationist idea at protests, that if Hillary lost and Trump won, there would be a progressive rebellion against them and it would be worth it in the long run. And that attitude is not there anymore because there is, I think, a greater understanding of, well, what Trump's doing now. If you lose power to Republicans for 4 years, a bunch of things can get done that can't be undone. And the rebellion that's going to overthrow them, we're not Turkey, we're not Syria. This is not a country oriented for a mass rebellion that throws an elected party out of power. Quite the opposite. So it really did change. The idea of what protest is effective and what protest can achieve, that did change. It is more routed into winning elections and then getting the right people in place in a slow, laborious process. It'll take a while. That's more what I found from people in the crowd. I did not find people saying, this is great, now we're going to march over and change the government. It was, this is great, now I've got 2 years of work or more ahead of me.
What's interesting about talking to you is I'm getting this sense that last week, there were a few things happening at once. You had Chuck Schumer kind of defending his ability to try to regain power as a political party in the Senate and Congress. And then you had Bernie, AOC, Tim Walz going out and trying to make a new case for why you would vote for Democrats, which is really all about corporate power.
Yeah.
And those are two different projects, but they could actually sing in harmony. I'm not sure that's like that was intentional. But it sounds like these two things happening at once, they're not necessarily in conflict. It's just also not really clear whether the Democrats are, as a party, will embrace what the Bernies and the AOCs and the Tim Walzes are saying.
Well, I should say, if everyone at these rallies could vote in the New York primary, and if it was tomorrow and not 2028, they would replace Schumer with AOC. Absolutely. Some of this is channeling an idea that the current party leadership is failing and they won't leave, and they need to be replaced. And Sanders is in an interesting position. He's 83 years old. This is his final term.
Yeah, he's very old to be making an argument that, we got a bunch of older guys in Washington.
But he's really not saying, follow me, I'm going to fix it. He's saying, you guys have to follow this. And he has this refrain that he started really in 2020. People chant Bernie. He'd say, not Bernie, us, not me, us. He did that again at these rallies. Like, please, thank you for showing up. Thanks for listening to me. But this is all about you and about AOC. That's what's new. It used to be, this is about you organizing for my campaign. Now this is about you and this congresswoman I'm traveling with, who you could be like if you decide to run for office yourself. And where does Schumer fit in that? No, Schumer would be replaced in that. In the long run, Chuck Schumer would not be leading the Democratic Party in the Senate. In some ways, if this is successful and Democrats had a big midterm with more progressive candidates, frankly, like what happened in 2019, they'd be in better shape electorally. But this is a movement that is looking past Schumer and saying, we can't have people like this leading us long term anymore.
Yeah, I mean, part of what made the Tea Party successful is that there were a ton of primary challenges for Republicans who seemed out of step with the Tea Party's more radical agenda. So are we starting to see that for Democratic members of Congress?
That has not happened yet. It is pretty early. The first primaries for the races we're talking about are literally in a year in Texas and Illinois. So it'll be a minute until we get a sense of who's running for these offices. And that is the next stage of what Democrats are going to be fighting about. And that's going to last for at least a year.
I'm kind of curious, after this week on the road, looking at how, Tim Walz, Bernie, AOC are presenting themselves, you must be curious about how the Democratic committee's events, these town halls, people's town halls, what they're calling them, that they're promising to hold all over the country in Republican districts that they see as vulnerable. You must be curious how those are going to compare. It'll be interesting to me to see just how much they're taking lessons from Bernie and AOC and Tim Walz, because they modeled these town halls after what Bernie did right after the inauguration, where he went to Iowa to these vulnerable districts to kind of barnstorm and filled up, rooms full of people. But he did that by being grumpy and fighty and not being scared of spitting fire.
Well, not just spitting fire, but saying things that would irritate people and get them to spend money against him, and that people in the media would say you can't do. Democrats don't like to say things that reporters will point out are very hard to do, or ask how they're going to get it passed, like a Medicare for all. And Republicans don't really mind. They really don't mind saying we're going to try this thing. And if reporters ask them about it, they'll be kind of snarky and they'll make fun of them for asking. And I think there is a desire for that, too. I just feel like the nickel and diming that was done of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren on how they would pay for Medicare for all, that's another thing that feels kind of quaint to Democrats now, because DOJ is just pretending they're going to balance the budget by cutting programs that don't balance the budget. And they're getting very far with it. They're getting much further in their goals than Democrats have.
Yeah, listening to you, I get the sense that the Democrats are certainly in the middle of a stylistic reorientation. And the real question is whether they're in the middle of an ideological reorientation. And that'll take time.
Yeah, stylistically, they are. That's already happening with the sort of Democrats who are getting primary challenges, are getting criticized and being told to leave the leadership. Ideologically, that hasn't happened yet.
Dave Weigel, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Dave Weigel is a national politics reporter over at Semafor. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Madeline Ducharme, and Ethan Oberman. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. Hillary Fry is our Editor-in-Chief. And I'm Mary Harris. You can go track me down on Blue Sky, say hello. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you back here next time.